It was 9 a.m. when I walked into that Chicago courtroom, my son leaning on his wooden crutches, his back bent like a man twice his age. The benches creaked under the weight of strangers whispering about the Villaseñor divorce. And then, silence. Judge Stephen Morales entered, tall, composed, the kind of man who could quiet a room with one glance. He scanned the benches, his eyes sharp, his tone detached, until he saw me. For a brief second, his gavel froze midair. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Why are you here?" The entire courtroom turned. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, tilted her head and smirked, her crimson lips curling with satisfaction. Her family sat behind her like royalty, whispering about how my son would finally lose the house. I placed my old leather briefcase on the defense table. Its sharp thud echoed through the room. That sound, solid, defiant, made the clerk stop writing. I felt the judge's gaze linger on me, and in that silence, the air changed. Jessica crossed her legs, the heel of her red shoe tapping the floor like a countdown. "He's nothing but a cripple," she whispered to her lawyer. Her voice was soft, but venom carries far. My son's hand trembled under the table. I placed mine over his, steady, firm, the way I used to when he was a boy with scraped knees and big dreams. No one in that courtroom knew that before I was Michael's mother, I had been someone else, someone the law once feared. They called me the Queen of Law. And now, after 20 years in silence, I was back in that same arena, not to win fame, but to defend what my family had left. "Your Honor," Jessica's lawyer began, her voice like glass, "my client seeks the division of marital assets and custody of the child. Her husband, Mr. Villaseñor, is physically incapable of fulfilling his duties." Each word struck my son like a hammer. I clenched the handle of my briefcase tighter. Inside, between yellowed documents and old memories, lay something more powerful than any insult. Proof. When Judge Morales looked at me again, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. If you've ever been underestimated, type justice in the comments. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. I read every word. But why did the judge look at me, like he was seeing a ghost? The morning after that hearing, Chicago felt colder than usual. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Jessica arrived in a red dress, expensive, defiant, as if dressing for victory. Behind her came her parents and brother, all polished arrogance and false concern. She didn't even glance at my son. Instead, she sat at our kitchen table, unfolded a stack of papers and said, "Sign these. I'm done pretending." My son's hands shook as he held the pen. I watched the muscles in his jaw tighten. The same boy who once promised me, "No one will ever kick us out again, Mom." Now, here he was, being pushed out of his own home by the woman he built it for. I stood by the sink, holding a glass of water that trembled with my heartbeat. "On what grounds do you say this house is half yours?" I asked quietly. Jessica's lips curved. "We're married, aren't we? Everything's 50-50. Don't you know the law?" Her words cut deeper than a knife. The same law I had once devoted my life to, now twisted against my son. But I didn't flinch. "You're wrong," I said, meeting her eyes. "This house was purchased in Michael's name before you ever married him. Legally, it's his alone." The room froze. For a heartbeat, even Jessica's lawyer, my old colleague, Jennifer Rivers, looked uncertain. She had once sat beside me in courtrooms, whispering strategies, promising integrity. Now, she stared at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. Jessica stood, her face contorted. "I don't care who you used to be," she snapped. "I just want out. I'm not wasting my life on a cripple." My son's voice broke, barely audible. "Jessica, do you really mean that?" She didn't answer. Her silence said everything. When the door slammed behind her, I turned to my son. He sat motionless, eyes fixed on the divorce papers, tears running silently down his cheeks. "Mom," he whispered, "what did I do wrong?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You loved someone who didn't deserve it," I said softly. "But love isn't our weakness, Michael. It's our proof that we're still human." That night, long after he fell asleep, I sat alone at the table, staring at the briefcase. The air felt heavier, because for the first time, I realized this wasn't just a divorce. It was war. And war needs evidence, something I was very good at collecting. The night my husband left had a date stamped in my bones. October 12th, 2003, a Sunday. I remember because the Bears lost, the pot roast went cold, and the porch light flickered like a bad omen. He put down his knife and fork, looked past my face and said, "Linda, I'm leaving. I have another life." No tears, no apology. Just a suitcase already packed and a polished car idling under the street lamp. Through the window I saw her silhouette, a widow with money, perfume thick enough to choke a prayer. Michael was 10, barefoot, standing in the hall with his Spider-Man pajama top twisted and wet at the collar. Boys pretend to be brave. Mothers don't get to pretend. I tucked my ring, a thin gold band, size 6, into my old leather briefcase that night. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted the law to swallow the memory of a broken vow. I sat at the kitchen table until the clock said 2:17 a.m. So counting our cash, $18 in bills, 2.34 in change. I wrote it down like it was evidence. Assets remaining, post-desertion. When you're a black woman who learned to survive systems, you learn fast that truth without paper is just air. On November 3rd, 2003, I pawned the wedding ring for $210. The pawnbroker didn't meet my eyes. Men rarely do when a woman's selling a dream. That money covered school shoes, heat for a week, and the copay for Michael's strep throat. I wrote that down too. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. Years rolled like freight trains. Mornings on my bike to the office, nights bent over neighborhood ledgers, fingers ink-stained, back aching. When Michael was accepted into electrical engineering in 2014, I stood by the sink and cried quietly into a towel so he wouldn't hear. I kept the acceptance letter in a plastic sleeve inside the briefcase. Proof that our house of paper had a foundation. The day he put the key to this 2-story home in my hand, May 22nd, 2019, he whispered, "No one will ever kick us out, Mom." The key was warm from his palm. The house cost $420,000. He showed me the closing documents like a boy showing a drawing from school. His pride filled the rooms before furniture did. I filed everything under Villaseñor Property, 2019, labeled, sealed, untouchable. Then came the accident, the midnight call, the scaffolding, the crutches, and Jessica's smile curdled into calculation. Grief changes the way a house sounds. Doors sigh, floors hesitate. Even the refrigerator hum felt like it pitied us. I told myself, at my age, I don't shout, I document. That's how women like me keep air in our lungs. On March 1st, 2023, 30 days before the custody hearing, I reopened the briefcase. Paper has a smell. Dust, ink, a little history. I laid out the deed, the dated mortgage statements, Michael's wire transfer for the down payment, $84,000 saved in lean years, each page a rung on the ladder we'd climbed. The law had taught me this. When they try to drown you in noise, reply with dates and amounts. From the hallway, I heard my granddaughter's steps, light, careful. Sarah stood in the doorway, hair in 2 puffs, clutching her stuffed rabbit with one ear half off. "Grandma," she whispered, "is Mommy going to take our house?" I knelt slow, knees popping. Not if the truth has a say. Her eyes searched mine like the sky before rain. Do we have the truth? I glanced at the pile of papers, at my hands that still knew how to arrange a case like a hymn. We have more than truth, baby. We have proof. And then the phone rang. Jessica's voice low, careful, and the word she used made my blood run cold. Assets. I shouldn't have heard it, but after 9:40 p.m., this house keeps secrets poorly. The vents carry voices the way rivers carry leaves. Jessica was in the back bedroom with the door cracked, whispering into the phone like a thief blessing her own hands. "Yes, split the assets," she said. "The house alone gets me leverage. Jennifer says long-term residence counts." I stood in the dark hall, hand on the wall, feeling the drywall's cool pulse. Words like leverage and counts don't belong in family. They belong in contracts that stain your fingers. I remembered 2019, the day Michael slid the closing packet across the title company's table. How he joked that his signature looked like a duck trying to fly. He signed alone. Jessica wasn't there. I kept the copy. Of course I did. The next morning, I brewed coffee at 6:05 a.m., the way I do when I need my spine warmed. The briefcase sat on the table, buckles catching the pale light. Jessica entered in silk and perfume. She poured orange juice like a queen pouring mercy. "Court's in 3 weeks," she said, checking her nails. "Let's be adults. Sell the place, split clean, move on." Michael's crutch clicked into the kitchen, steady as a metronome hiding a tremor. He looked smaller in morning light. "Jess, this is our home." She smiled without warmth. "It's a marital residence, Michael. Don't make this emotional." "Don't make it a heist," I said, keeping my voice low. She turned to me. "With all due respect, Linda, you're out of your depth." I tapped the briefcase. "Depth is what keeps you from drowning." She snorted. "Jennifer will file by Friday. If you stall, we'll petition for temporary occupancy and, I cut in, you'll be asked to show acquisition documents." She blinked, too slow. When people lie, time moves differently on their faces. After she left, I opened the briefcase and laid the chain of title like rosary beads. Warranty deed, 05/22/2019, mortgage note, $336,000, down payment wire, $84,000 from Michael's account ending, 7/1/32, all months pre-marriage. I felt my heartbeat steady to the rhythm of dates. By noon, I took the bus to Fulton Market, to a copy shop where the machines grunt like old men. I made 3 certified copies, stamped in blue, received March 6, 2023. The clerk, a young woman with chipped polish, said, "You building a wall?" I smiled. A bridge, over a flood. Back home, I filed 1 set under court, evidence, A, and slid another into a manila folder tucked under the tray of loose change by the fridge. People never look under small things. They're too busy hunting for grand gestures. At 4:20 p.m., the doorbell rang. A courier delivered a brown envelope from Rivers and Associates. I slid it open with a butter knife. Petition for dissolution, petition for equitable distribution, affidavit of hardship. On page 3, highlighted in yellow, primary residence subject to division. I laughed once, softly. Paper against paper. That I understood. That evening, the house hummed its tired song. Michael napped in the recliner, Sarah colored at the coffee table, and the sky bruised toward night. I wiped the counters, then something caught my eye. The trash bin, lid ajar, a triangle of crumpled receipt peeking out like a tongue. I pulled it free and flattened it on the counter. A hotel receipt, printed clean, with a date, Feb 24, 2023, and a total, $486.72. On the memo line, someone had written a first name in blue ink, looped and confident. I washed my hands, dried them slow, and held the slip to the lamp. Ink gleamed like a secret unashamed of itself. The name on the receipt wasn't hers, and I had seen it once, years ago, on a case file that ruined a family. The next week, I found out what kind of teacher Jessica really was. It was late, close to 10:15 p.m., when I passed by Sarah's room. The door was half open, the nightlight throwing soft halos on the wall. I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and low, the tone she saved for control. "Listen carefully, Sarah. When the judge asks, you'll say Daddy can't take care of you anymore. You'll say you don't want to live with a sick person. Understand?" My granddaughter's small voice trembled. "But I love Daddy. I don't want to lie." Jessica's reply came cold as marble. "If you don't, we'll lose everything. Do you want to live poor? With Grandma and your broken father?" I froze outside the door, one hand on the wall, the other clutching my chest as if to hold my heart still. Sarah whimpered softly, the sound of innocence being bent. I wanted to burst in, to scream that the truth was sacred, but I knew anger without proof is noise. So I stood there, memorizing every word, every pause. Years in law had trained me to listen for confessions, and this one dripped through the vent like poison. Later that night, Jessica brushed past me in the hallway, phone in hand, face blank. "Could you keep your granddaughter quiet tomorrow? I need rest," she said, without looking at me. I stared after her, the smell of her perfume hanging like a lie that wouldn't leave. When she closed her door, I walked to the kitchen, poured water into a glass, and counted my breaths. 4 in, 4 out. That's what keeps you from screaming when you've seen too much injustice to believe in coincidence. I sat by the window, city lights flickering in the distance, and wrote on a notepad. March 7th, 2023, 10:15 p.m. Jessica instructing minor to lie. A record. Cold and factual. My first piece of evidence. At dawn, I watched Sarah eat her cereal, her eyes dull. The child who used to chatter about stars and paint the sun yellow now traced circles in her milk. "Grandma," she whispered, "will God be mad if I lie?" I took her small hand, warm and shaking. God doesn't punish children for what grown-ups force them to say, but He listens, always. Her eyes lifted, watery and pleading. "So if I tell the truth, will He listen louder?" I smiled, though my throat burned. "Oh, baby, louder than thunder." She nodded, quiet. And I realized something fierce. Jessica was no longer just a cruel wife. She was a danger to the soul of a child. That night, I unlocked my briefcase, slid the notepad inside, and whispered to the dark, "This time, I'm not losing to silence." The next morning, while taking out the trash, I saw Jessica on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, whispering into the cold air. And then I caught a name, William Harris, and my stomach clenched. Because that name didn't belong in our home. It belonged to a file I once buried 15 years ago. The orange tree in our backyard was older than Sarah, maybe older than the house itself. Its fruit was small, sweet, and stubborn, like the women in our bloodline. That morning I called Sarah out there while Jessica slept late, her hangover perfume drifting through the hallway. We sat on the wooden bench beneath the branches. The air smelled of citrus and rain. Sarah's eyes were red, her dress wrinkled from a restless night. She held her rabbit close, the way children hold on to what doesn't lie. "Honey," I said softly, "I heard what your mother said last night." She flinched. "I don't want to do it, Grandma," she sobbed. "I don't want to tell the judge bad things about Daddy." I wrapped her in my arms, her hair smelling like shampoo and tears. "You won't. Not while I'm alive." She looked up at me, blinking. "But Mommy said we'll lose everything." I brushed a strand from her cheek. "Sweetheart, some things aren't worth keeping if we lose ourselves in the process." The sunlight touched her face, and I saw it. That spark I'd feared was gone. She smiled faintly, a small rebellion in the shape of a child. "Promise me, Grandma," she whispered. "You'll be there when I tell the truth." "I'll be there, baby, right behind you." We stayed under that tree a long time. When she finally ran back inside, I sat alone, staring at the rough bark, the roots digging deep under the soil. Proof doesn't just come from paper. It grows quietly, waiting for its season. That afternoon, I went to the old file cabinet in the attic. Dust rose like memory. I pulled a folder marked Harris, W. Real estate fraud, 2007. A face stared back from the photo inside. A man with a perfect smile and a trail of ruined families behind him. So Jessica hadn't just fallen out of love. She'd fallen into business. I took the file downstairs, spread it across the kitchen table, and whispered his name again, testing its power. William Harris. The man who once bribed a county clerk, who'd walked free on a technicality, one I had argued against in court before I retired. I looked at his photo beside the hotel receipt I'd found in the trash, both glowing under the same lamp. And I realized the orange tree wasn't the only thing with roots in this story. That night, I called an old friend, a man who owed me a favor from the days when truth was my trade. "Robert," I said when he answered, his voice thick with smoke and memory. "I need eyes on a name. William Harris," discreetly. He sighed, recognizing the weight of my tone. "Linda," he said, "are you ready to wake the queen again?" I looked at my briefcase on the counter, the old leather cracked but loyal. "Robert," I whispered. "She's already awake." Robert Medina's office sits on Cermak Road, 3rd floor, a window that looks like it's forgotten how to smile. I got there on March 8, 2023, 11:10 a.m. The stairwell smelled of old tobacco and winter coats that won't quit. He opened the door before I knocked, like he remembered my rhythm. "Linda," he said, voice made of gravel and coffee. "I figured the day would come." Inside, the desk was a map of lives undone, manila folders, rubber bands dying slow, a camera with gaffer tape around its mouth. He poured me black coffee in a chipped mug that read, "Truth is a stubborn thing." I didn't smile. "I need eyes on William Harris," I said. Discreet, fast. Robert flipped a notebook, scribbled the name. "Harris, that ghost from '07, slipped past on a technicality." "He didn't slip," I said. "He bought the floor." He nodded once. "All right, retainer is $200. I'll need names, places, a week." I opened my old leather briefcase, took out an envelope with $600 in cash and a cashier's check for $600 from First Midwest Bank. Memo line, invest, RH. Money felt lighter when it carried a purpose. "Targets," I said, sliding a list across. "Jessica Torres, Jennifer Rivers, attorney. Possible meeting point, Gold Coast, hotels around Delaware and Rush, restaurants with linen napkins and lies. Jessica's schedule is looser after 6:30 p.m. and Saturdays after 2 p.m. She leaves my granddaughter with me, calls it self-care." Robert whistled softly. "Self-care with a mogul's credit card. I want photos, receipts, and, if God's feeling generous, video. But no heroics. You get caught, you were never here." He leaned back. "You always did know how to load a case with timestamps." "Time is all the law respects when people don't," I said. We set the deadline, March 30th, the custody hearing. "Bring me something before then," I added, "or I'll walk into court with memory alone." He knew what I meant. Memory is a fine witness until cross-exam tears it to threads. On my way out, Robert stopped me. "Linda, you sure you want to wake that part of you? The one the city named?" "They named me." I only answered. At 2:05 p.m., I went to Halsted and 18th and bought a tiny digital recorder, model XR11, $49.99 plus tax. The clerk, a kid with wary eyes, asked, "For an interview?" I said, "For a promise." That night I cleaned the kitchen until the counters shone like a cross-exam. Michael dozed in the recliner, ankle swollen above the brace. Sarah drew galaxies with a broken purple crayon. Jessica texted in the doorway, smile hooked to a screen I didn't pay for. I sat at the table, labeled a fresh folder. Court, evidence, B, Robert. Paper clips lined like soldiers. The recorder lay beside the briefcase, patient as prayer. My hands remembered motions my mouth had forgotten to admit. Stack, stamp, staple, mark, copy, seal. At 9:42 p.m., the front door clicked. Perfume arrived first, then Jessica's laugh. Low, pleased, practiced. A car idled at the curb, expensive as a secret you can't afford. She checked her lipstick in the hallway mirror, then caught my reflection and looked through me like fog. "Long night?" I asked. "Productive," she said, and floated past. When the taillights slid away, I pressed my palm to the briefcase and felt the old heartbeat answer. I didn't wake the Queen. The city had called her name. Robert chose Thursday, March 16th, 7:35 p.m., a booth in the back of Marina's Diner on Canal Street where the silverware is honest and the coffee forgives. He was already there, hat on the seat, a manila folder fattened by other people's choices. He didn't waste breath. The first photo. Jessica in an emerald dress, stepping out of a black S-Class, arm looped with William Harris. Gold Coast curb, Hotel Fairview, awning flapping like it had gossip. Timestamp 03/12/23/21:18. Next, a hotel invoice. Room 1114, Fairview, Chicago. Dates 02/24/02/25. Total $486.72. Signature line scribbled W. Harris. On the back, in blue ink, J. See you next week. W. The way some men autograph ruin. He slid a slim stack of restaurant slips. Levantine on Rush, $192. 40, 2 entrees, champagne by the glass. Alder and Ash, $164.85. Parkview Lounge, $68. Each signed W. Harris, sometimes with a neat tip, 22%, as if generosity could bleach intent. Then came the jewelry purchase, boutique on Oak Street, Oro 3, R523, 1350 Hours, item code BR14K7. The clerk had scrawled, bracelet, J. My fingertip paused on the loop of that single letter. Ink can be cruel and intimate at once. Bank records? I asked. Robert nodded, produced 2 printed ACH confirmations, public trail, not a subpoena's feast, but enough to smell smoke. 030223 $2,000. J. Torres, memo, retainer, 030923 $1,800. J. Torres, memo, travel. Origin Harris Property Group LLC, Act ending 9914. Not the master account, Robert said. He feeds smaller wells from a bigger river. I catalogued in my head. N1, patterns and timing. N2, receipts, invoices. N3, photos. N4, still sleeping, waiting for the right knock. He placed a USB drive on the Formica like it was a key you shouldn't touch without a witness. Lobby cameras, he said. Public view, no warrants needed. I have Harris and Jessica entering together 0312, 21.16, leaving 0313, 07-02. No kisses, no doubt. Chain of custody? I asked out of habit and hunger. Documented and dated. He tapped the folder. Your old religion. I paid him the balance. $900 more for the extended hours and cold sidewalks. He pushed back $150. You'll need copies. Notaries? Time. I spent the next day at Kinko's on Wabash, Machine Bureau 4, grinding out truth at 10 cents a page. I stamped received Mar 17 2023 in blue on each set and made 3 packets. Court copy, personal copy, emergency copy. The USB I cloned twice and sealed in Tyvek with dates across the seams in black Sharpie. At home, I laid everything on the dining table like a surgeon laying instruments, each item shining in its own small, terrible way. Michael watched from the doorway, eyes wet, a man caught between gratitude and grief. Mom, he said, voice thin, is this enough? I looked at the deed, the receipts, the photos, the neat memos breaking promises into digestible lines, and I felt that old courtroom stillness climb back into my bones. It's enough to open the door, I said. But to walk through, we'll need one more thing. Robert had left it for last, a final slip peeking from the folder. I slid it free and read the reservation note scribbled in careless ink. Private dinner, Riverlight, back room, 03 to 25, 8 p.m., W plus J plus JR. Because JR wasn't random. It was Jennifer Rivers, and back rooms are where people forget how sound travels. On March 19th, a Sunday warm enough to trick the bones, I set a simple table in the backyard. Chicken thighs with lemon, rice with parsley, a bowl of sliced oranges from our own tree. I wasn't feeling festive. I was setting a stage. Jessica loved appearances. I needed her to perform. She came out late, phone in hand, sunglasses despite the sun already leaning west. Michael had shaved, slow and careful, a man trying to meet dignity halfway. Sarah brought her rabbit and sat between us like peace with stuffing. I passed plates, poured water, said grace that felt like a closing argument, disguised as a prayer. Jessica speared a piece of chicken, barely tasted it. We should be practical, she said, looking at the fence instead of at people. Sell the house, split clean. I already have someone interested. Someone? I asked, casual as a breeze I didn't trust. A buyer, she said. Real estate never sleeps. Michael set down his fork. This isn't a listing, Jess. It's our home. Emotion won't pay for Sarah's school, she said, voice syrup over stone. I breathed slow, reached for the salt, and pretended it was the only thing I needed to move. The XR11 recorder was taped under the table, battery fresh, red light tucked against wood grain. It caught silverware, small breaths, and the little slips people make when they think dinner can cover the smell of ambition. Who's handling this hypothetical sale? I asked. She shrugged. A friend. He knows things move when he touches them. Name? I said, cutting an orange with a dull knife that knew the way. She smiled like a lock. You don't know him. Try me. Silence slid across the tablecloth. Sarah swung her feet under the bench, sneakers brushing the grass. Somewhere on the other side of the fence, a radio mumbled a game. The announcer bored with his own voice. Jessica lifted her glass. Fine. William, are we done? Michael blinked. William who? Names aren't the point, she said too quickly. I turned my face to the orange tree, pretending to admire fruit. In my head, I laid receipts beside invoices, hotel slips beside timestamps, a neat staircase built from paper. I kept my voice mild. If this buyer is so eager, why meet at a restaurant instead of a closing table? Her eyes flickered, a cloud crossing a small sun. Who said restaurant? Your shoes, I said, glancing at the stilettos that make sense indoors, not on grass. They're practicing. She laughed, but it didn't land. You always did love detective work. Not love, I said, and let the knife rest. Practice. She checked her phone, jaw tightening. Anyway, I won't be home next Saturday night. Self-care. The kind with linen napkins? I asked. Her phone lit. She stood. I'm done here. Michael's hand trembled toward her, stopped midway like a bridge with no other side. Jess, don't do this. She looked at him without seeing him. I already did. She walked inside, leaving perfume and a temperature drop. Sarah leaned against me. Grandma, will Daddy be okay? He will, I said, kissing her hair. Because we are. When I cleared the table, I slid the recorder into my pocket and pressed stop. Dinner had given me more than silence. I rinsed plates, dried them, put them away in the same order I always had. Ritual is how you hear the out of place. At 9:11 p.m., Jessica's door clicked shut. A minute later, I heard her speak low into her phone, just outside her window, the kind of whisper that wants to be overheard only by money. She said the name of the place like a secret that thought it was sophisticated. Riverlight, back room, Saturday at 8, under Harris. Monday arrived like a clerk's rubber stamp, blunt, inevitable. I laid the apartment in papers. Deed, mortgage, down payment wire, the hotel invoice, the restaurant slips, the Oak Street bracelet receipt, the ACH transfers. The table looked like a city map made of other people's choices. I labeled Exhibit A through Exhibit H, wrote dates in the right-hand corners the way a pianist finds middle C without looking. Michael watched me from the doorway, thumb working the edge of his crutch handle. Mom, what if the judge doesn't care? He will, I said, sliding Exhibit C into a clear sleeve. Judges don't always feel, but they read. At 11:30 a.m., I took the green line to a notary near Wabash. The room smelled like toner and hope worn thin. I had the clerk stamp our affidavits, received Mar 20-2023 in blue, clean as a winter sky. I ordered 3 binders at the copy shop, white, 1.5 inch, and fed them page after page until the spines ached. Court copy, personal copy, backup copy in black marker. I've buried friends, I don't bury proof. Back home, I set the XR11 on the counter and transferred the garden audio to USB-B. I named the file Dinner 319 MP3. I made 2 clones and sealed them with Tyvek envelopes, initials across the seams, LV, RO3-20. Chain of custody isn't just for juries. It's for your own soul when fear starts whispering that you imagined everything. In the afternoon, I called Robert. Confirm Riverlight, Saturday 03:25, back room, I said. I want angles and distance, no heroics. Booth by the kitchen door, he said. They won't expect the ice machine to have ears. Bring the good lens, I said. And remember, Jennifer likes to stand. He chuckled. I remember how you taught me to count the beats between lies. I'm older now, I said. I count faster. At 5:40 p.m., Sarah did homework at the table while I hole-punched Exhibit D. Grandma, she said without looking up, what happens if Mommy cries in court? We bring tissues, I said. And truth. She nodded like a little judge gaveling her own heart. Michael shuffled in with 2 mugs of tea, placed one in front of me, sat slowly. Thank you, he said, though gratitude felt too small for the moment he was trying to live through. Night came early, as if the sky didn't want to see what Saturday would become. I laid a clean navy dress across the chair, pressed the hem flat with my palm. 20 years away from court, and my hand still remembered how fabric should fall when you need your spine to show. Before sleep, I opened the briefcase and read the reservation note again, the one scrawled careless, private dinner, Riverlight, back room, 0325, 8 p.m., W plus JR. Some people write their own indictments. They just don't bother to learn the word. At 7:58 p.m. On Saturday, March 25th, I stood across the street from Riverlight, wind stinging my eyes. The sign glowed gold, the hostess stand flickered with polite lies, and through the long window, I saw a back hallway with a curtain that believed in privacy. And then Jennifer Rivers arrived, heels precise, hair perfect, the kind of woman who assumes walls are loyal. March 25th, 7:58 p.m. The wind off the river bit through my coat as the sign for Riverlight glowed gold like a promise it couldn't keep. Through the long glass, I watched a hostess lift the velvet rope and a back hallway curtain breathe open. Jennifer Rivers arrived first, heels precise, posture that says, I don't lose. Jessica came 2 minutes later, emerald silk, smile rehearsed. And then William Harris, perfect jaw and a wallet that thinks it's a witness. I didn't go to the table. Robert took the booth by the kitchen door, lens tucked low, ice machine hissing a cover beat. I moved to the ladies' room corridor where voices passed thin as paper. The XR11 lay in my briefcase beside Exhibit AH. I could feel the metal warm under leather like a tiny, patient heart. At 8:23, Jennifer slipped from the back room toward the restroom. I stepped forward. You'll want to powder, I said, as if I were any woman making small talk with another. She froze, caught my reflection in the mirror, then turned. Linda, she said, and tried to make my name sound like a mistake. I opened the old leather briefcase, its hinges sighing like an old friend who still remembers the story. I handed her a single sleeve, warranty deed, 05/22/2019, mortgage note, wire, $84,000, all pre-marriage. Your motion calls it marital residence, I said softly. Residence isn't acquisition. Her eyes flicked to the dates, then back to me. Cohabitation factors. Don't misquote law to a woman who taught you the footnotes. I kept my voice low even. ABA Rule 3.3, Candor toward the tribunal. Rule 4.1, Truthfulness in statements to others. You stand up with Harris behind you and call that equity? Color rose under her foundation. You don't know what you're walking into. I know exactly who I'm walking past. I tilted my head toward the back room. Ask your client why a child needs to learn lines the night before court. A server whisked by with plates that smelled like buttered secrets. Jennifer leaned closer. If you had anything real, you'd already be in front of a judge. I don't rush, I said. I prepare. I slipped another page into her hand. Hotel invoice, room 1114, 02240225, 48672, W. Harris, and the neat ACH to J. Torres, memo, travel. And I document. Her fingers tightened around the paper until it whispered. In the back room, Jessica laughed the way people do when they're counting money that isn't theirs. Jennifer glanced that direction, then back at me. I saw it, a flicker of the woman who once sat beside me, taking notes like a pen could be a sword. You're going to break her, she said, but it sounded like she was warning herself. I'm going to hold her up to the light, I said. If she breaks, that's on the glue she used. She exhaled. What do you want? Less than you think. I closed the briefcase. Tomorrow, Monday 9:01 a.m., file an amended statement acknowledging the house as separate property. Withdraw your claim for temporary occupancy and tell your client to stop rehearsing perjury with an 8-year-old. That's not how this works. Defensive, automatic. That's exactly how this works when paper meets dates. I turned to leave. Choose your side before the record chooses it for you. Back at the booth, Robert slid me a thumb drive under a napkin. Clean audio from the hallway, he murmured, and enough stills to choke a liar. I tucked it into the briefcase, buckled the straps, and felt the old weight settle into my palm, the kind of weight that steadies a spine. At 8:47, the curtain lifted, and the three of them posed as shadows across linen, believing walls were loyal to money. I didn't have to touch the door to know it would open when I was ready to push. March 30th, 9:00 a.m. The courtroom smelled like old wood and ink that's seen too many disappointments. Reporters shifted pens, neighbors folded their hands, strangers chose sides with their eyes. Judge Stephen Morales entered, and the room remembered how to be quiet. Jessica sat in a cream suit that tried to make innocence a fabric. Jennifer looked carved from duty. I searched her face for the choice she made after Riverlight and found only stillness. Michael gripped his crutch, a beat late on each breath. Sarah tucked her rabbit in my tote, the ear peaking like courage. "Counsel," the judge said, scanning the tables. I rose. "Your Honor, Linda Villaseñor for the plaintiff." A ripple went through the benches. The old name, freshly spoken. The judge's eyebrows lifted in a way that said noted and proceed in one breath. Jennifer stood first. "Your Honor, we maintain that long-term cohabitation and—" I stepped to the lectern. "Before we argue theory, let's set facts." I held up Exhibit A. Warranty deed dated 05/22/2019, executed solely by Michael Villaseñor. Mortgage note, same date. Wire of $84,000 from account ending 7132, all pre-marriage. Residence does not equal acquisition. The statute hasn't changed because someone wishes it had. Morales nodded once. Exhibits A through C are admitted. Jennifer swallowed. No objection. I slid Exhibit DH across. Restaurant receipts, jewelry invoice, ACH transfers from Harris Property Group LLC to J. Torres. The clerk stamped each page with the blue comfort of received, March 17, 2023. Paper lined up like soldiers who don't blink. "Relevance?" the judge asked. "Pattern," I said. "Financial entanglement concurrent with marital abandonment and a proposed sale of separate property." He nodded again. Admitted. I rested a hand on the old leather briefcase and felt the smooth ridge where time had polished anger into resolve. "Your Honor, one more item." I lifted a USB sealed in Tyvek, initials LV, 0320, and handed it to the clerk. Audio recorded 0319, 7:06 p.m., our backyard table. My voice is present, so is the defendant's. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "Objection, privacy, lack of foundation." "Overruled," Morales said, already tired of theater. "Play it." Speakers crackled. Silverware chimed softly, the tiny music of a family trying to behave. My voice, calm. "Who's handling this hypothetical sale?" "Jessica's, light with contempt." "A friend. He knows things move when he touches them." My question, "Name." Her answer, reluctant, clear. "William." "Are we done?" A beat. My son's voice, small. "William? Who?" Her reply, "Names aren't the point." Murmurs rose and fell like a tide ashamed of itself. The judge glanced at Jessica. Her mouth gathered, then fell apart. "Mrs. Torres," he said, voice steady, "did you instruct the minor child to give false testimony?" She jolted. "Absolutely not." I lifted a second USB, labeled Dinner 0319.mp3, clip 2. "Different night," I said. Her bedroom vent carries sound. Another objection. Another overrule. The room went still in that deep way truth demands. Then the child's voice, my granddaughter, thin but honest. "I love Daddy. I don't want to lie." Jessica's voice, sharp as a snapped bone. "If you don't, we'll lose everything. Do you want to live poor, with Grandma and your broken father?" The benches exhaled like a single stunned body. Someone whispered, "Lord?" Michael bowed his head and wept without sound. Jessica shot to her feet, wild-eyed. "That's edited. She's framing me." "Sit down, Mrs. Torres," the judge said, and it wasn't a request. I turned slightly. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I call Sarah Villaseñor." The bailiff opened the side door. Sarah walked in holding the rabbit by its torn ear, chin lifted the way children lift it when they've decided who they are. She took the stand, feet not touching the bar, and swore her truth in a voice that trembled but did not break. "Sarah," I said gently, "what do you want the court to know?" She looked at the judge, then at her father, then at me. "I want to live where people don't make me lie." The room didn't move. Even the clock forgot itself. I nodded once, blinked away the heat behind my eyes, and placed my palm on the briefcase to steady the moment. "Nothing further," I said. Judge Morales leaned forward, hands folded, gaze cutting through the last of the perfume and pretense. "Counsel," he said to Jennifer, "do you wish to cross-examine the child?" The courtroom felt smaller after Sarah's words, as if truth had pulled the walls inward and left no room for pretense. Jennifer stood, then sat, then stood again, a seasoned attorney calculating damage in real time. She cleared her throat. "No questions for the child, Your Honor." The benches rustled, an answer disguised as mercy. Judge Morales removed his glasses and cleaned them with the hem of his robe, an old habit from a younger lawyer I once knew. When he looked up, his gaze held none of the courtroom's dust. "Counselors, I've heard enough." Silence. The clerk's pen hovered, unsure where to land. "The court finds that the residence at address redacted, acquired on May 22, 2019, is separate property belonging solely to Mr. Michael Villaseñor. There will be no division of this asset." He paused, letting the sentence stand on its own feet. "Custody of the minor child, Sarah Villaseñor, is awarded to Mr. Villaseñor, with Mrs. Linda Villaseñor designated as primary caregiver when needed. Mrs. Jessica Torres is granted supervised visitation, scheduled to be set by Family Services. No spousal support is awarded." Michael inhaled like a man breaching the surface after too long underwater. My fingers tightened around the handle of the old leather briefcase until the ridge cut into my palm. The sound that followed wasn't applause. This wasn't that kind of room, but a human exhale, grateful and surprised. Jessica jerked to her feet. "You can't, this is rigged." Her voice broke on the edges of its own echo. Morales's gavel fell once. "Mrs. Torres, sit down. Your conduct before this court, including attempts to suborn false testimony from a minor, will be referred to the appropriate authorities. I suggest you speak carefully with your attorney." Jennifer lowered her eyes. "Not defeat, acceptance. Sometimes those are cousins." The judge turned to me. For a heartbeat, the years rolled back, and I saw a young public defender struggling not to drown under a wave of money he didn't have. "Mrs. Villaseñor," he said, formal voice softened by a memory he didn't name. "This court acknowledges your preparation and your restraint." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, steady. When the gavel fell for the last time, the room began to rise, a tide of bodies and whispers. Michael's crutch tapped twice, then stopped as Sarah ran into his arms. He folded around her, shoulders shaking, the two of them making a shape I wanted to frame and hang in the kitchen where fear had once lived. On our way out, an older woman touched my sleeve. "I don't shout either," she murmured. "I keep dates." I squeezed her hand. The world is full of witnesses who never make it to the stand. In the corridor, Jessica leaned against the wall, mascara cracking, fury giving way to the greater humiliation of being seen. Jennifer whispered, "We're done here," and put a hand on her client's arm the way you do when there's nothing left to argue. Robert waited near the exit, hat low, eyes bright with the kind of pride men don't say aloud. He didn't ask for thanks. I didn't offer money. We have our own accounting. Outside, the March light felt cleaner. Bells from the downtown church drifted across the wind like a benediction for the tired and the stubborn. Behind us, a reporter called my name, asking what turned the case. I didn't stop walking, didn't turn my head, didn't give him my face. I raised the briefcase slightly instead, as if to remind him, and myself, what speaks loudest when everyone else is shouting. The first morning back in our house felt like a stranger practicing kindness. Sun slid across the kitchen tile. The refrigerator hummed a softer song. I brewed coffee and leaned my forehead against the cabinet door the way you do when a long-held breath finally leaves your body and you don't quite trust fresh air. Michael slept late. When he rose, he moved without apology, measuring the distance from chair to hallway like a man reclaiming his own map. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I want to try the steps today." We took them one at a time. Wood answered under his weight. No creak, just acceptance. At the top, he laughed once, surprised by himself, then wiped his face with the heel of his hand as if tears were sweat he hadn't planned for. Sarah hung her drawings on the fridge. A house with a tree, 3 stick figures, a rabbit with 2 ears again. "I fixed him," she said. "Some things you can fix." I kissed the top of her head and didn't argue with theology spoken in crayon. By midweek, the neighborhood had already written a new chapter for us. Mrs. Davis at the market tucked extra oranges in our bag. The mailman lifted a hand like a salute. Strangers nodded with the shy intimacy small victories grant. I said thank you without promises. Peace is a loan we pay daily. Word came about William Harris on a Thursday. The kind of man who withdraws faster than his wire transfers when a woman loses her leverage. Jessica's number blocked him. His driver stopped appearing. The boutique bracelet sat in a pawnshop case, losing value under fluorescent lights. Someone said she'd moved to a small apartment out by the tracks, that she kept the curtains closed in daylight. I believed them and wished her a quieter kind of ruin, the kind that teaches. Michael began physical therapy again. Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m., clinic on Archer Avenue where the walls are painted the color of persistence. His therapist, a woman with forearms like vows, said, "We start where you are." He nodded, eyes steady. When he made it down the parallel bars without stopping, Sarah clapped so hard the receptionist laughed and wiped her eyes. At home, I opened the old leather briefcase and removed the copies I no longer needed to carry like a shield. I kept one set in the fireproof box, one in the attic, one in my nightstand beside the chapstick and the rosary I don't pray with as often as I threaten to. I slid the recorder into a drawer, battery removed, and wrote, "Case closed, 03/31/2023 on a sticky note because sometimes closure is a label you give yourself. That evening I stood under the orange tree. New blossoms had nudged out since winter, stubborn and clean. I thought about the women who taught me to survive, my mother counting coins at the table, my aunt reciting due dates like psalms, the neighbors who knew when to knock and when to leave soup by the door. None of them would have called me a queen. They would have said, "You did what needed doing. I prefer their crown." "Grandma," Sarah called from the porch, "dinner's ready." I turned. Michael was at the table. 3 plates. A bowl of sliced oranges. The house holding us without condition. I stepped inside, closed the door with my palm flat to the wood, and listened to the quiet that follows a storm when the only sound left is breath learning how to stay. On April 2nd, 2023, I took the case closed, 03/31/2023 sticky note from my nightstand, and pressed it on the inside lid of the fireproof box. It looked small there, like a flag planted in quiet ground. I slipped the last binder in beside the passports, the birth certificates, and the letter Michael wrote me when he was 10, misspelling strength in blue crayon. The latch clicked. The house exhaled. Morning light moved across the kitchen like it had appointments to keep. Michael brewed coffee without asking me how I take it. He already knew. 2 sugars, splash of milk. He carried both mugs steady, the crutch tucked under his arm, gait determined but less angry with him than it used to be. "Therapy at 2, he said. "You coming?" I nodded. We don't waste victories by letting them walk alone. Sarah sat at the table cutting orange slices with maniacal focus and a plastic knife. "Grandma," she said, "is the judge still mad at Mommy?" I chose the truth children can carry. "He's not mad, baby. He's careful." She considered this like a small philosopher and fed the rabbit a felt carrot. "Then we'll be careful too." I did a small thing that felt like a large ceremony. I cleaned the old leather briefcase with saddle soap, rubbed patience into all the tired corners, and slid it back on the top shelf of the hall closet. Not retired, not forgotten, just resting. The weight in my hand as I lifted it made my wrist remember every door I'd pushed open. A woman's tools age with her, but they do not lose their names. By noon, I walked the block, 18 minutes around, past the market where Mrs. Davis waved an orange like a blessing, past the church whose bells had learned our plot twists, past the pawn shop where, years ago, I traded a ring for heat and medicine and a boy's future. The man behind the glass is new now. He smiled the way the other one never did. We are all changing clerks, I suppose. In the afternoon, I sat under the orange tree while Sarah sketched our house with a ruler-straight roofline. She drew the 3 of us on the porch and the rabbit with both ears intact. "What should I write on top?" she asked. "A title," I said. She thought, then printed in careful letters. "Home, no for sale sign." I laughed, and it sounded like a gate unchaining. The sun tilted west, and a wind came off the river, clean as new paper. I thought of the women who raised me to survive by counting. Dollars, days, doses, the distance between what's owed and what's received. I thought of the judge's face when I said my name out loud after so many years, and how recognition isn't fame. It's a ledger, balanced at last. We didn't win because I shouted louder. We won because I kept dates and amounts, because I refused to let feelings sweep dust over footprints. That is my religion. Simple and stubborn. Receipts. When the phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number, a reporter wanting a quote about the comeback of the Queen of Law, I let it ring. The title never fed a child. The work did. I turned the ringer off, set the phone face down, and sliced another orange. At my age, I don't ask the world to be fair. I ask it to be legible, and I make it so. And if anyone wonders why I walked into that courtroom after all these years, they can read the answer in black ink and blue stamps, filed where it cannot be erased. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.